So a few things about getting ready to code in Visual Studio. We're going to add a few extensions. Now, adding in extensions is a painless and straightforward process. So here is what Visual Studio Code looks like, or some similar welcome screen will show up when you start your version. I've been using mine for a while, so there's a little bit more going on. But on the left-hand column, this is where we have some of our primary controls. Now I have one separate extension I added here called Fountain that allows me to actually use a code editor to write scripts, which is actually kind of cool and fun. But that's a topic for a different day. Right now we care about the extensions. So if I look at the tooltip by my cursor here, it says extensions. Up here I will have my Explorer. That's where when I'm setting up my files I can open a folder, I can start a new file, lots of different things. But I care about extensions right now, and now if I look in the extensions I'll see that I've added some extensions. Now Better Fountain is the thing that allowed me to write scripts, but two that we do need to add, one is Beautify and one is Live Server. So to add an extension, if I just start typing in the search bar up here, it will come up and I can see there is Beautify. Now as we're doing this, one thing we want to do, I'll make this a little bit bigger to see, is pay attention to how many times a particular extension has been downloaded. That gives you some indication of its popularity, aka usefulness, but it also helps you to know, is it likely to be maintained? Now if I click on it, it gives me the details over here, and then what I want to start to look at is, well, instructions of how it's working and trying to find out is there any information that would indicate that this was started but it hasn't been well maintained. So Beautify is one that we will use that helps to clean up the indents and formatting of our code. And the other one we will use quite extensively will be our Live Server. Now we can see that's been downloaded 9.2 million times. So that's pretty good. Now the nice part about putting in Live Server is then it will open up our document inside of our default web browser, and it will then, every time I make changes to the document and save, it will update those changes in the web page for me to see what is happening. So the two extensions that we care the most about right now will be Live Server and Beautify. We will look at some other extensions that can increase our overall functionality as we're working, but those two right now are the most important. So once we've chosen it, then we can click install, or in my case I could uninstall it, but I don't want to do that because I will be using Live Server quite extensively as we work here. So I'm going to close that, and now what I want to do is I want to just make a new document. Now ideally we should put every project that we work on into a folder. So with that I'm not going to open a folder, but instead I want to create a new folder. So I'm going to make a new file and then save that. And as I choose to save that, I'm going to select the desktop, and now I will click New Folder and give that folder a name. And now I will name my file, and my file should always, the first default file for any project should always be called index. That means when we access this folder or directory when it's on an actual real web server, this is the page that will be loaded. So I'm putting the .html extension on it because we want to create the web page, and then we will be able to add some CSS, add some JavaScript, add some other content, and we will be up and running very quickly. So now it comes up, and what's really nice is you can see it shows me the path name of where this file is. That's pretty awesome. Now if I just start typing HT, there's code completion that will happen here, and I want to choose HTML5. Definitely don't want XML. Don't get me down that topic right now. That's a long drawn out conversation with a lot of hurt feelings. But I'm going to work on HTML5, so I'll click there, and boom, I now have the core of a basic document. It now highlights if I wanted to change the width here. We'll leave it at device width. And now I can hit tab a couple times, and now it brings me to the title for my document, the title that shows up in the title bar in our web browser. And I will just put that in, and if I hit tab one more time, it now brings me into the body where I can start typing. So with this, if I wanted to put a headline in, I hit H, and now we can see it immediately knew what was there. I don't have to do the brackets, I don't have to do the closing tag, and I can just put that in very quickly. Now if I wanted to put in a paragraph, and now if I type LOR, we'll see it comes up with the word lorem. Now if you're familiar with putting in placeholder text, this is what's going to happen here. Now I don't have screen wrapping, and that would require me to turn on word wrapping, and if I go under the view pull down menu, I can choose word wrap, and now we can see it wraps around. Now your colors, I just realized, may be a little bit different here as we're working on it. So if I go, I don't want that. I probably should have modified my theme, which we can do that as well, which inside my preferences. Now on the welcome page, it gives me an option to modify my color theme right away. Forgot to do that because I have the theme that I like. If I go into my color theme, you'll see that I am using the color theme Monokai. Now I grew to appreciate and like this color theme for my coding when I was using Sublime Text some years ago. Since Sublime Text, I've used brackets, I've used Atom, and now I'm using Visual Studio Code. And ever since using Sublime Text, I have now been using that color theme in every other code editor that I work in because I enjoy the colors that it uses, especially for HTML and JavaScript code. So now we have our document set up here. We only have the one file. Now if I save this, if I want to view it, so we have our file, but we don't technically have the folder that it's in open, but we can choose to do that by going and clicking on Open Folder, and now we can see we have the desktop and now that folder, and I choose Open, and now that will change our view here a little bit where we can see that I have the folder over here because we can have multiple folders open and they will all show up on this column or list here on the left. And now I have my file here saved that I'm working on. Now another way that we can open a folder as we are working, if I go to the desktop, so I'm going to once again close this. So now I'm seeing my desktop view. If I drag this to the program icon, so if I drag this to the actual application, it opens that folder, which that's probably the way that I do it the most often, but otherwise if I just choose open and we open a folder, not a file. So it's a subtle distinction, but once we've done that and have this folder open, we'll see that something appeared down here at the bottom that wasn't there before where it says Go Live. And what Go Live is going to do is open this web page inside our web browser. So it starts a server, and we can see there is now my web page. I can see the title, demo, the headline, and the paragraph. So everything that we've done is now visible there. I'm going to shrink this down a little bit, and we don't need that to be quite so big as well. And just to better show, well actually we'll shrink it a lot more so we can see what is happening. And maybe currently we'll move this over to the side here, and then that allows us to see. Now to maintain my indents manually, I just hit the tab key to move over. And now if I want to put in another paragraph, Just type it in, hit save, and we can see that the page updates itself. If we look at the URL, we can see 127.0.0.1. That tells me that I'm at my home or root server on this computer. This is the port it's running it through, and there is the file name. So these are some of the specifics of how this works as we're trying to get things started. So we're using live server. We can see down at the bottom it even tells me what port I'm in. If I want to terminate this so it doesn't just kind of keep running in the background when I'm done, I can click right here and it turns off the live server. So it's a pretty slick way of working. This allows us to put what we're working on. Now if I were to add another paragraph and save it, we'll see it doesn't update because we're no longer in the live server. So I'm going to just close that tab. We don't need that anymore. If I click here, comes up, there it is. Now we have that live one running. We can see how everything is working. But generally, while I'm working, I'm not going to be looking at the left-hand side, adding in text and other information, but instead, what we're going to want to do as we start working with and learning JavaScript is we are going to look at our developer tools, and very specifically, we will be using the JavaScript console. So we can get to this in most web browsers by using some combination of view or developer menu. So you just have to look for where we're going to find the JavaScript console. Otherwise, if we right-click and choose Inspect, that opens up a side over here, and we will see we have certain things available. We can see the elements on the page, but more specifically, I can see the JavaScript console that is there. So now we have the console up, and we're going to start sending some messages to that, and that is what we will do next. Now that we set up our environment and we're ready to start coding, what we need to do is figure out how to do that. Now, to put the JavaScript in, we can put it in a bunch of different places, and there's good and bad for all of it. So if I were to say, go up here and type in script, now I have that in, and if I want to type this, I'm just going to send a message to the console. So the console, the JavaScript console that we showed up in the web page here, and if I just type in log, we'll see it's giving me an option, log to the console. Yep, that's what I want, so I hit return. Now the message I want to send, I put it in quotes. Single or double quotes work, so I could use single or I could use double. Either are acceptable. And just type something in. Now, when I use default code, it will generally put a semicolon at the end of the line. When I'm writing my code, that is an optional. There are times and places we have to use semicolons, but that at the end of each line or line break of code, we don't have to. At one point we did, now in JavaScript we don't have to any longer. So I have the live server running. If I hit save, we should see it updated and it put that message in the console. So I have a script inside my head, and this works. Now, one thing I can do is let's try to gain access to something in my document. So let's say I want to grab the headline and I want to change what that says. And to do that, we need to make a reference to it. So well, technically we could just change it. But if I want to do more than one thing or be able to do something at a delayed point, then, or at a point in the future, we need to make a reference so we can store it in memory. We do that as a variable. And to declare a variable, I can use var. That is traditionally how it was done in JavaScript. Now we will generally use let or const. So if the item we are setting, like say we set a number, and we'd say const my number equals 2 or 3. I missed when I was typing. That works, but if I try to change my value, and well, let's say I'll change it to 2, which is what I initially meant to type. Well, see, we get an error message. It says assignment to constant variable, telling me, and notice it tells me what line number. Pay careful attention to that. What line number did something break? It shows up in red, so we look for that line number here in our code. So it's telling me I can't change something that is constant. But if we use let is a variable that can have changing content. So now when I do it, no error message. And if I were to say log out, type in log, once again, my number, so I'll log that out. Now let's save it and we'll see, and now boom, it put 2, even though I set it when I created it equal to 3, I changed its value to 2, and now we logged it out and there's no error message. So these are a few key starting points as we're getting going with JavaScript. So we can create a variable, we can change its value, we can log it out to the console. This works out pretty slick. Now if I wanted to let JavaScript know about this headline, well, what I have to do is go let my headline be equal to, and the command that we use is document.query selector. And now I'm going to type in, and we'll see how it's trying to help me here. It's like, hey, is there something you think you want? And I'll just put in quotes H1. All right, so that's working. So we'll just continue this whole logging thing. Let's see what that comes out to be. And, no. So it's telling me that it's null at line 13, so line 13 here. I didn't get an error message, but it's telling me that it's null. So we have to think about this for a little bit. And this script is executing line 8, line 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Then the script is done executing, and then we work down 15, 16. Line 17 is when this object springs into existence. So technically, this headline doesn't exist yet, even though we said, hey, I want to know about you. Not there. So we have to do something a little bit different. One common way that we can do this, and the way that we're going to do it now at the beginning, is we're going to put our script not in the head, but we're going to put it at the bottom of the body. Still in our document, still inside the body, but at the bottom. So that means the headline is loaded into memory, then we try and access that. So that's a key thing. Right here, I tried to access something that did not exist yet. That's why it came up and said null. It says, no, I don't know what you are. If I take the script that I have and just drag it down, so now it's down here. Let's save this. And we can see that that headline is right there. I logged out that headline. So by putting the script down here at the bottom of the body, it's still inside closed body, inside closed HTML. And you may realize this is why it's really important to beautify your code so that it is clean. And if you do want to beautify it, then what we can do, so we can see if we look through our different commands that we have here, it's a lot of fun stuff, but if I go and pull up my command palette, look at that, beautify right at the top there, and I can just hit beautify, and now it put in the extra returns to space between, so it separated the head from the body, those from the HTML, making our document actually easier to read. So that's important. So let's recap a few things here. I created a script. I put the script in the head and found out it worked until it tried to gain access to things in my document that weren't there yet. Now we will look at how we can use events down the road, and we can use an event called loaded. So we can determine after the content of our page is loaded, then execute our script. So we can't actually put the script in the top of our document, back up in the head if we wanted. We can even set our script into an external .js file, which is a very common way of doing it. That works too. But right now we're going to just put the script at the bottom of the body. Just a reminder, HTML doesn't care about extra returns or white spaces, so it makes it easier to read. JavaScript doesn't care about extra returns or white spaces, so it makes it easier to read. So I'll put things in to separate out my 3 different items that I'm doing, so it's easier to read. And if I put in more spaces or fewer spaces or no space around the equal sign, it doesn't care. JavaScript's friendly that way. It's one of the more friendly programming languages. You'll notice I did not put semicolons at the end of my lines. That is my preference while I'm writing JavaScript. So when you see semicolons at the end of a line, that usually means I used code completion to make that line, so then it put it in for me. So these are a few of the key things as we're getting started. We can create a variable. The variable can store a reference to a number. It can store a reference to an object, in this case the headline. It can store a reference to letters or words or a string, as we call it in programming speak. So we have a lot of things that we're going to be working with as we roll forward and try to understand how to use JavaScript with our web pages.